The place was just a normal store when suddenly, a black car appeared while being chased by police cars. Inside the black car was someone suspected as a fully armed and strategically genius robber. After escaping the pursuit of most of the police, he entered a deserted road but was still followed by an inspector and 2 police officers in a car. Somehow after a tunnel, the robber's car suddenly already split in half while the front half had disappeared. The inspector said that if this robber is diabolic, the most difficult robber to catch. A few months after the incident, it was seen that the rulers in the government were gathering at an event. Soon, a beautiful woman named Eva Kant came there with a very well welcome from many people and seemed highly respected. During the conversation, they also discussed the robber named Diabolic. In fact, Diabolic is already well known for his ferocity and causing fear in the community. After the event, Eva went home alone, but when she was walking home, she was suddenly approached by the inspector that tried to catch Diabolic before. His name is named Jinko. He asked her to chat for a while. From there, it was said that Eva, who had just come from South Africa, turned out to have a red diamond whose price was very fantastic. Jinko said that Diabolic must be planning something to rob Eva's red diamond. At first, Eva didn't believe it because she had just arrived 2 days in that city, and no one might have known about her treasure. But Diabolic was a very smart person and had a lot of informants. He also never showed his face, so he could be anyone. Jinko promised that he would send a number of guards who would continue to protect her. He intentionally used Eva as bait to catch Diabolic. On the other side of the hotel, some hotel stewards were seen talking about Eva's personal bodyguard, and one of them was appointed for it. Somehow, Diabolic had managed to wiretap the conversation. After returning from the hotel, the steward, whose name is Roberto, then walked home alone. But suddenly, Diabolic appeared and immediately threw a throwing knife from behind and stabbed the man to death. After that, Diabolic returned to his place and heard the way Roberto speaks in a loop to remember it while trying to imitate it. The next day, the hotel manager was desperate to find Roberto, but a surprising thing happened. Roberto magically showed up from behind. It turned out that Diabolic had disguised himself as Roberto using a face mask that looked exactly like Roberto with the exact copy way of speaking. His job as Eva's personal servant finally started. When Eva entered her room, Diabolic immediately followed her and prepared the bathtub for Eva to use. He then saw that Eva was called by someone named Giorgio. He is a rich man in the city who will schedule a meeting with Eva later that night. Somewhere else, a wealthy woman named Elizabeth had just arrived at her house with a sad face because she was always left by her husband. But at that time Elizabeth arrived, she saw that her husband had returned. Surprisingly, the husband was Diabolic, who was about to leave again. Meanwhile, Eva was meeting with Giorgio, who turned out to be her fiancé. It was seen that Giorgio was very expressive when he met Eva, who was starting to get annoyed with him. But behind that meeting, Diabolic was trying to break into Eva's safe, but suddenly Eva came to her room earlier and saw that her safe had been successfully opened. Diabolic, who was there, hiding in the shadow, ambushed her from behind. Strangely, Eva didn't seem to be surprised at all. Instead, she told him that the red diamond was fake, while she had already sold the original one, making Diabolic surprised, not only because she was saying the truth, but also because she was not afraid of him. She even went further and almost kissed Diabolic, but that didn't happen because Diabolic immediately left. The red diamond was also taken by Diabolic. On his way back to his hideout, Eva managed to make Diabolic think hard about who Eva really was, and when he arrived at his secret hideout, he had proven to himself that the red diamond he brought was indeed fake. In her room, Elizabeth having trouble sleeping because her husband had not come home yet, but for a moment, she woke up and looked at the bedroom window when suddenly, a man was seen coming out from under the ground of her yard. Elizabeth immediately went downstairs to make sure who was there. After a couple of steps, a man's voice was heard walking upstairs, but it turned out to be Diabolic. Turned out, Diabolic made his hideout right below his yard. The next day in the hotel room, Eva woke up because Roberto entered his room and put a breakfast tray on her bedside tabletop. When it was opened, it turned out that the breakfast contained a red diamond ring. From there, Eva immediately realized that Roberto was Diabolic, so Eva immediately gave a signal to Roberto. And without further ado, Roberto opened his face mask, showing the face of the real Diabolic. It was seen that Eva had really fallen in love with Diabolic. Meanwhile, Elizabeth was looking for the opening to the underground room in the yard that she saw last night. Luckily at that time, Elizabeth managed to find the door. Led by curiosity mixed with fear, she went down to the room. When she got inside the room, she found all the secret life that her husband had been keeping from her. There were sculpted face masks complete with the equipment that Diabolik used to do his actions. She was utterly shocked and immediately called the authorities. Meanwhile, in Eva's hotel room, she suddenly had a deep relationship with Diabolik. Eva asked who the real Diabolik is, but Diabolik was not a fool. He still kept his secret. On the contrary, when Eva was asked about Giorgio, she without any hesitation said that he was her fiancé, but Eva didn't love him in the slightest. She hates Giorgio because he had Eva's card, and she couldn't do anything against him. Eva was forced to accept it. Without the slightest doubt, Eva asked Diabolik to search for the ace card that Giorgio used to tool her and get rid of it. She even asked Diabolik to kill Giorgio if needed. Diabolik, who has also been immersed in Eva's beauty, accepted her request. On the other hand, the police who had been called by Elizabeth went straight to her house together with Inspector Jinko. Meanwhile, Giorgio, who was afraid that his fiancée would run away, immediately called the hotel manager and asked about Eva's condition. The manager immediately looked for Roberto, who had disappeared an hour ago. The manager went straight to Eva's room and knocked on the door. Hearing the knocking on the door, Eva asked Diabolik to hide in the closet. When the manager entered the room, he immediately asked for permission from Eva to do a search, and Eva let him do that. She then diverted the manager's attention by asking him to start searching from the toilet to buy some time for Diabolik to escape. Back to Inspector Jinko, who had entered Diabolik's hideout. The police found several face masks that were often used by Diabolik. Knowing all that, Jinko asked all the officers to stand by and get ready to catch Diabolik, while Diabolik himself went to another secret base he had, which was not far away from there. Diabolik at that time took a box containing biodata about Giorgio. It was known that Giorgio was part of the government. He then made Giorgio's face mask. After finishing his job, he went back and immediately drove home where Jinko was already on standby there. He slowly entered his base, and when he turned on the lights in the room, Jinko immediately ambushed. But Diabolik wasn't running out of tricks yet. He managed to escape from there, only to get arrested by another officer upstairs. Meanwhile, Elizabeth, who couldn't believe what she just saw, was petrified in place seeing her husband get arrested. The next day, Eva was waiting for Diabolik at a restaurant to talk about their next move, but he hadn't shown up yet because he had been arrested. A few moments later, she saw Diabolik's arrest news in the newspaper. This made Eva quite surprised. Soon after, in Diabolik's trial, Eva came there with a hat covering her face. Eva tapped her cheek several times with his finger, trying to give a Morse code to Diabolik, saying what she could do to help him. But Diabolik wasn't replying until after some time. He returned and replied by telling Eva that she had to go to a place and gave some instructions to her. That night, Eva immediately followed the instruction from Diabolik, from taking the car to heading to his secret base. There, Eva was ordered to take 2 tubes containing strange liquids, green and yellow liquids, as well as bring some cash. The next day, after it was announced to the public that Diabolik would officially be executed, Eva instead came to Giorgio. Her arrival was of course immediately greeted warmly by Giorgio, who really loved Eva. Eva then challenged Giorgio to prove his love for Eva. She only asked for one thing, namely to bring her to meet Diabolik on the night of his execution. He initially didn't want to do that, but to prove his love to his desired woman, he decided to do that. That night, Eva and Giorgio went to the prison and asked the head warden to bring them to meet Diabolik. Eva and Diabolik's plan finally went according to plan. It took quite a while at that time, and nobody knows what happened, but what is clear was that during his time in prison, Diabolik never spoke, nor showed any facial expressions. The next day, when the death sentence was given, Diabolik remained silent without any expression. In the rain, the police and Inspector Jinko were also present there to witness the death sentence. Jinko felt something was strange with Diabolik and was about to stop the executioner, but he was too late. The guillotine had already chopped off Diabolik's neck. However, who would have thought that when checked, it turned out that the one who get beheaded was not the real Diabolik, but Giorgio, who was wearing Diabolik's face mask, while Diabolik, who was wearing Giorgio's face, had already gone from there. It turned out that behind it all, Diabolik and Eva had planned something, namely to make Giorgio submit to each of Diabolik's orders through the liquid that Eva injected. Not only that, but Diabolik also extracted some information from Giorgio. Turned out, he had stashed all his treasures in a vault in a bank out of the city and put the key of the vault in the safe in his office. After gathering all information needed, he replaced Giorgio's face with Diabolic's face mask and leave the prison safely. Back to Jinko, who knew that the beheaded one was not Diabolic. He planned his strategy to continue pursuing where Diabolic go. Meanwhile, in Giorgio's office, Diabolic was seen breaking into the safe full of documents and taking one of them containing a confidential document about Eva and a key to Giorgio's vault, which was full of gems and diamonds. But in the middle of that, Jinko secretly called Giorgio's secretary, who didn't know anything. He told her that she needed to leave the place. But after closing the phone, the secretary instead went to Giorgio's office, while Diabolic himself had long gone from there. Eva was waiting for him downstairs. Diabolic realized that Jinko already knew that he was still alive. But even so, he still intended to continue to rob Giorgio's diamonds. On the other hand, when Jinko and some police officers visited Giorgio's office for a search, they accidentally found that the secretary was still there. Jinko then asked her what Giorgio put inside his safe. The secretary lied, saying that she knew nothing. Luckily, Jinko released the secretary, but he didn't just do nothing. He immediately looked around to find something that could be used as information and was lucky at that time. One of the officers found a secret file behind the toilet closet. After being examined, the documents contained confidential information about some government officials. After finding that information, Jinko began to plan a strategy to find and catch Diabolic. In another place, a woman was seen just arriving at a bank. The woman was about to save her expensive painting in the bank's vault. The vault belonging to the bank had a security system that is quite thick and complicated because the safe is covered by 3 parts. One part is made of hollow iron, and if it is touched by any object, the bank's alarm will sound so that it is impossible for anyone to get past it. Then the vault itself needed 2 keys to open it, namely the key from the bank and also the owner that had to be opened simultaneously. Not only that, the manager revealed that only she could open the vault door. Meanwhile, at the police station, Jinko was seen giving some confidential scandalous files belonging to a man who was in the government. Jinko gave the file away for free in exchange for his help. After that, Jinko and one of his colleagues found new information, namely Diabolic would definitely rob a bank again, but maybe in another city because Giorgio's vault key had been lost. Back to the woman at the bank, who turned out to be Eva in disguise to dig up information about the vault. She told Diabolic every detail about the security system of the bank, starting from the vault's security system to what time did the bank close. When the bank closed at 5, the box that was put in the safe earlier suddenly emitted a laser beam that could break down the safe locker door. From there, Diabolic immediately took over the action. He made several tools to be able to break through the layers of the safe. Diabolic then explained how he would enter the vault to empty all of Giorgio's treasures. He would reach the vault from the manhole that connected to the bank. He would need a long time to penetrate the security system of the bank and use a tool he made to open the vault without triggering the bank's alarm. And after successfully doing so, he will open the drain cover, which would later flood the entire vault, as well as the CCTV power source of the vault. On the other hand, Giorgio's secretary turned back to the office and headed to the toilet to retrieve the secret files she deliberately hid there. Of course, this was immediately easily discovered by the police. Jinko then took the secretary to his room and immediately asked what else was missing from Giorgio's small safe. Knowing she was cornered, the secretary told him that the key to the bank vault had disappeared from there. Jinko immediately made a strategy to catch Diabolic, but of course, Jinko was very careful. He didn't want everyone to know his next move. Meanwhile, Diabolic himself had started the action, but not with Eva. She was told to just wait at home. At the bank, the broken water channel had now been noticed by the bank guard, so the alarm went on. They contacted the bank manager and then called the fire department. The bank manager suddenly headed to the bank, but luckily, Diabolic managed to make her arrival late. An argument now ensued between the bank's security and the fire department. They were confused about what to do because the vault could only be opened by the manager herself. On the other hand, Diabolic's plan went smoothly without anyone finding out about it. Time passed and Jinko, along with his men, headed to the bank. After they were told about the situation, Jinko immediately asked the police in the city to close all access roads around the bank. Soon, the manager finally arrived, while Eva, who stayed at home, could only wait full of worry about Diabolic. Everyone pondered on how to catch Diabolic. The problem was, if the safe door is opened, the water will hit the person who opens it and might even flood the entire bank. Jinko finally decided to just wait for Diabolik to come out of there by himself. With a tight guard from outside ready to arrest him, Jinko thought that if he came out, he would definitely come out through the underground aqueduct. So some guards were also stationed near some manholes around the bank. On the other hand, Eva, who was fed up with waiting, finally decided to come out and help to clear out Diabolik's escape route. Meanwhile, Diabolik had managed to take Giorgio's jewelry and possessions. After that, he left from there as fast as possible. Lucky for Diabolik, his escape route was already cleared by Eva, so he only had to take care of the rest of the guards. But unfortunately, when he was about to leave, Jinko was suddenly there and shot Diabolik in the shoulder. There was a small argument between them. Jinko himself couldn't kill Diabolik right away. Seeing Eva coming from behind, Diabolik backed away, and Eva immediately appeared and hit Jinko in the leg to buy some time for them to run away. Sometime later, Diabolik and Eva were seen sailing in the middle of the ocean. Soon after, Diabolik came and gave her the red diamond ring that originally belonged to her. But unexpectedly, she threw it into the ocean and said that the only thing she wanted was nothing more than Diabolik himself. A long time passed and Diabolik was seen climbing a building to steal a golden crown known as Armand Crown that was stored inside there. On the other hand, there was only one security guard on duty at that time because the rest were playing cards in their office. Diabolik managed to paralyze the guard using a throwing knife, and when there was an alarm sound indicating that the crown had been stolen, the guards immediately rushed to check what happened. They had difficulty opening the door because the keyhole had been blocked by Diabolik. This gave a lot of time for Diabolik to steal the crown. The guards had to blow up the door, only to find Diabolik, who managed to escape using a paraglider with the crown in his possession. The guard realized that the man who was flying was Diabolik. Meanwhile, Diabolik had successfully landed and entered the car that Eva drove to pick him up. The scene then showed a place where a show was being held and attended by a lot of aristocrats and the bourgeois. The show featured a dance where the dancers used the Armand jewel. The police were stationed around the venue to guard in case Diabolik showed up to steal the jewelry. During the show, all eyes were on the dancers who were very beautiful while wearing Armand jewel. But suddenly, the lights in the place went out and the dancers were immediately directed by one of the police to secure them. Meanwhile, the other officers had all fainted. The dancers didn't know anything was wrong and continued to follow the police's directions. It turned out that the police were Diabolik, who was disguised using a mask he made. As a result, Diabolik managed to steal Armand jewel by kidnapping the dancers and dropping them off on a deserted street. The dancers then went to a bar to look for help. There, one of the visitors teased one of the dancers who turned out to be an undercover that was paid to find information about Diabolik. She then used the phone on the bar to call none other than Inspector Jinko. She reported to Jinko that the bait had been successfully eaten by Diabolik. It turned out that the whole show, everything that happened, was a plan from Jinko in an effort to catch Diabolik. Jinko had dipped Armand jewel in a liquid that later could be detected using the tools prepared by Jinko and his staff. Furthermore, Jinko and his men had started their mission while carrying a tracking device to find the whereabouts of Diabolik. In addition, Jinko took the time to order his men to take the dancers back home. The search continued until the radar stopped on the road beside a stone cliff. They were confused because there was no sign of a path to a certain hideout, but Jinko continues to analyze the place. On the other side, Diabolik and Eva continue to stare at the loot they have collected. Diabolik then tried to kiss Eva to show his affection, but soon after they were shocked when they saw the CCTV footage. The police had succeeded in blowing up the secret path that leads to the hideout. Both of them argued about whether to immediately escape or try to save the loots that Diabolik collected. Soon after, they were seen escaping from a secret evacuation tunnel that leads to a forest, but Diabolik somehow decided to leave Eva and tried to save himself, leaving Eva that had to save herself from Jinko and the other officers. She desperately jumped into the river from the cliff. Meanwhile, Jinko thought that Eva would be much help to him because Eva might want to testify in court after Diabolik betrayed her. Jinko began to search for what was in Diabolik's base. It turned out that the stolen treasures that Diabolik had collected were fantastic, including rare paintings, gold, jewelry, and other valuables. At that time, Jinko managed to find a blueprint for another place belonging to Diabolik and then rushed to go to that place. As soon as they arrived, one of the officers accidentally found the path to the hideout. That place was where Diabolik made all his masks for his actions. Jinko immediately ordered his men not to touch or take the items there, because he had a plan to place his men there to ambush Diabolic when he showed up. Somewhere at an airport, a noblewoman named Altia was seen arriving. She would go to a meeting in the city using a piece of rare and beautiful jewelry. She didn't feel right because she expected Inspector Jinko himself would escort her. She then went to the police station to find Jinko, who turned out to be her lover. When they met, Altia immediately asked Jinko to propose to her, but Jinko tried to explain that there was one goal in his life that had not been achieved, namely to catch a genius thief, Diabolic. Altia tried to understand when Jinko said he would propose to her when he had caught Diabolic. That night, some police officers were stationed in Diabolic's hideout when, as Jinko expected, Diabolic showed up. He tried to overhear a conversation that was going on inside the hideout through the wall using his tools. On the other hand, the guards were changing shifts at this time. The place was being guarded by the police named Aged Roller. That was a good chance for Diabolic to attack him because Aged Roller was alone. Suddenly, Diabolic appeared in front of the door. Roller immediately took out his gun and started shooting at Diabolic, but it turned out to be just a mirror, and it was just Diabolic's reflection. He managed to enter and immobilize Roller. The shot before made the other police guarding outside rush inside. But unfortunately, they only found Roller, who was unconscious, and saw the mass printing machine was taken away by Diabolic. The incident was a big letdown for Jinko, because his men failed to catch Diabolic. Jinko had to face the minister to receive the instructions to find out Eva's whereabouts so that they could cooperate to find where Diabolic hid in exchange for Eva's freedom. At the same time, the minister managed to contact Eva and made an agreement, but Jinko did not entirely agree with that because he wanted to put Eva in jail too. He then called her and asked one of his men to track where she was. They managed to track her, but when they got there, Eva managed to escape using a manhole right beneath the telephone booth. Meanwhile, at Diabolic's hideout, the police were examining Diabolic's loot led by Sergeant Alina. However, at that time, Armin's collection bracelet was missing. Jinko suspected that the bracelet had been stolen by Eva, so he ordered his men to immediately track Eva using the tracking device. Jinko's suspicion was true. Eva was using the bracelet. Shortly thereafter, Sergeant Palmer and Agent Roller managed to find Eva's whereabouts and tried to catch her. Roller tried to fight her alone, but she was no match for him. He was easily immobilized and Eva managed to escape. When Jinko arrived, Roller just smiled because he had managed to bring back Armin's collection bracelet from Eva's hands. But this was a problem for Jinko because if Eva didn't use the bracelet, then searching for her would be much harder. In Diabolic's secret base, Alina was helped after Roller offered himself to help examine all the stolen treasure. On the other hand, Jinko was scolded by the minister because he screwed the mission by making an additional move. So whether he wanted it or not, Jinko had to work together with Eva to catch Diabolic because the minister gave an ultimatum to Jinko who would be removed from his position if he didn't comply. Finally, Jinko was forced to do this by giving a message through the newspaper that Eva's wish will be granted, namely free from punishment. Eva and Jinko finally had a meeting at a building. Eva said that she was heartbroken after getting left behind, and now was planning to revenge for that. Eva said that in order to provoke Diabolic, Eva planned the extraction of Diabolic's stolen goods, because Diabolic is someone who is not willing that all of his stolen property is taken by the police, so he may come back again to get his loot back. Inspector Jinko started to prepare his plan by preparing one armored car as a decoy to lure Diabolic from his hideout, while the real treasure will be carried by an ordinary van. Jinko also prepared armed forces to secure the armored car, which will make it more convincing. On the other side, an officer had confirmed that information on the extraction of stolen assets belonging to Diabolic has been spread secretly, so Diabolic was expected to know the information. A scene between Jinko and Altia was shown. Altia once again asked Jinko to propose to her. Jinko felt a glimmer of hope to catch Diabolic, so he asked Altia to wait a little longer. After that, Altia hired a makeup artist to make her more charming when she attends the event she was going to attend. A brief scene then showed how Altia stored her rare necklace in the cupboard. Jinko's plan was starting soon. A number of special forces were already preparing to carry out the mission, and Roller had volunteered himself to drive the van that would bring the loot because he felt guilty for having made a mistake while guarding Diabolic's hideout. He knew the task would be difficult because he might end up face to face with the Diabolic. Meanwhile, at that moment, a brief scene showed that Alina secretly went into the van, which would be driven by Roller. Jinko's plan finally started. The armored van finally left the hideout with a lot of armed guards guarding the van. Soon after, the van that Roller drove also left the place from a different direction. Soon after, the armored van entered a tunnel. Not long after, they were stopped by a gate blocking the path, and a paralyzing gas came out filling the tunnel, which made the special forces faint. A figure was seen coming out of the tunnel wall, but it turned out that the special forces were only pretending to be unconscious and immediately rushed to catch the mysterious figure. But when they catch the mysterious figure, it turned out to be a dummy. Meanwhile, in the other place, Altia realized that her necklace had gone from its place. Roller, who drove the van containing the loot, had reached the forest and Eva was waiting for him holding Altia's necklace. Plus, the fact that the one who brought the car was Diabolic disguised himself as Roller using a mask he made. Everything was finally revealed. It turned out that all this was Diabolic's plan. He prepared this plan just a few seconds before they left their base at the first ambush. He deliberately made Jinko believe that he had left Eva behind, while Eva actually escaped through a gap in the cliff below the water. Suddenly, both of them were shocked by Elena, who came out of the van. She immediately pointed her gun at that moment and managed to shoot Diabolic. She explained that she was suspicious of Roller, who had previously volunteered to take the van, because Elena knew that Roller was not that kind of person at the time. Eva tried to divert Elena's attention to give chance for Diabolic to paralyze her by using a knife handle to make her faint. In the end, Diabolic and Eva managed to bring back all the stolen goods and succeeded in deceiving Jinko. Jinko could no longer do anything because he had failed to catch Diabolic. He had lost his opportunity to get a promotion in order to have a good start to propose to his girlfriend, who was a nobleman. Even though at that time, Altia didn't care about that. 10. The film ends.